Nashville Symphony christened the Schermerhorn Symphony Hall. It was Leonard Slatkin conducting. He was bridging the symphony from the late Kenneth Schermerhorn to whoever would be the next conductor. That person was Giancarlo Guerrero, who has now moved on after 16 years. And the city is in search again for a full-time conductor. So Leonard Slatkin is back, and for the first time, he's on This Is Nashville. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
We're live this hour, which means we're also streaming video at youtube.com/@WPLN if you'd like to watch. You can also give a shout-out or pop a question in the chat for Maestro Slatkin. We're also going to be opening the phone lines at the end of the hour to talk about the state of classical music and state of the arts generally. So stay tuned for that. Well, I want to start by rewinding the clock 20 years to the gala that opened the Schermerhorn. You've talked about how the conductor's instrument is really the concert hall itself. How did the instrument perform out of the gate?
It was remarkable. First of all, it had the look of a more old-style hall. It was a shoebox as opposed to something with round edges. So it was closer to, say, Boston's Symphony Hall than to Carnegie. The sound was resonant. It was full. It also perhaps had a little more reverberation. That means the sound lasted a little longer than seemed ideal. But over the course of rehearsal periods, we were able to get that adjusted with the acousticians.
You made last-minute adjustments to
yes.
dampen the hall.
Absolutely. You have to. That had to do with opening curtains, deciding
I see.
what the material in the seats would be to be absorbent. There are lots of factors that go into working with a hall. Acoustics is at best an imperfect science. You can really never know just from putting it in if it's going to sound well or not. You have no idea.
Well, trial and error goes a long way in a lot of fields. Well, we're going to talk more about like the difference between live and recorded music. So forgive me for playing recorded music, but you do the best you can here. You conducted parts of Mahler's Symphony No. 2. Let's take a quick listen. So what was the Nashville Symphony like at that time, 20 years ago?
The orchestra had come from playing in really not a very good acoustic facility at all. Now they had a new home. Getting used to something like that is just like any family moving into a new place. You'll discover a closet you didn't know about, the way it looks, where a corner is, all these things. But the difference, of course, is that the musicians have to get used to a whole new way of playing.
Yeah.
How do they listen to each other on the stage? Can the violins in the back of the firsts or seconds hear the cellos who are on the other side of the stage? Will the brass be too loud? What about those timpani and percussion? Is it overwhelming? And we had an organ. Very rare in an American concert hall.
Is it? Okay, well, I knew there was a lot of talk about the organ because if I'm not mistaken, it was a rather expensive thing to put in at the time, and maybe it got damaged in the flood. I don't recall, but I didn't know it was unusual.
Very. Look at even Carnegie Hall or Geffen Hall. No organ. These days, the electronic instruments are very good, though, so it's certainly fine to use a version like that, but Nashville was lucky in that it has a real pipe organ. Now, it's not used so often in symphony concerts, but there are other things you can do with it. The organ concerts, one a week would be great.
Yeah.
And there is always an audience for it.
Well, I guess that goes to the fact of the building itself being an instrument. When you're talking about a pipe organ, it almost literally becomes true. Yeah.
What I mean by that is that, say you're a violinist and you buy a Stradivarius. That's your instrument when you're the violinist. But what is the instrument for the entire orchestra? It is the hall itself. Everybody has to learn how to adjust, not just to each other, but the various acoustic phenomena that occur within that hall. How does the sound bounce off the walls? Does it reach to the furthest seat away? Can a really soft passage be heard in the upper reaches of the balcony? And is loud sometimes too loud? All these are things that take really years to get used to. But the orchestra adapted very quickly. That opening concert was a lot of things happened. We played pieces with extra brass ensembles. We had Edgar Meyer and Bela Fleck and Zakir Hussain to do a concerto. We had all kinds of things that showed off the versatility of the hall, even without knowing what it was really going to be like.
Well, you, Leonard Slatkin, are a 6-time Grammy winner. In fact, I'm sure it's how you're often introduced. 6-time Grammy winner, Leonard Slatkin. But at least one of those, I think, is with the Nashville Symphony.
It was the first Grammy that they had ever won. Even though I'd made a lot of recordings under Kenneth Schermerhorn, we produced an album of music by Joan Tower. And in particular, people got fascinated with her work called Made in America. I remember I was on tour with my Washington Orchestra. I forget what state we were in. And I got this call in the late afternoon. The ceremony was in L.A., and Alan Valentine, the executive director, was out there. And my phone rings. I'm in the car, and he says, "We won a Grammy." I didn't even realize we were nominated. And it was the first one, and among many that the orchestra would then go on to win.
Right. Well, I think, the symphony's trying to match you. I think they have 6 Grammys now. So I'll have to fact check that behind the glass if you help me out here. But let's take a listen to a bit of that album from Joan Tower's Made in America from 2008. A little bit of, I'm doing some conducting over here.
Very good.
Nice
right
good
hand
conducting?
technique.
Yeah, good technique? Okay, good. I'm conducting Michael on the board back there. Sorry to bring that down because I could listen for a while, but that's for Joan Tower from Made in America. So you're an American conductor, Joan Tower, an American composer. Your music this year, which we'll talk about more coming up, is all meant to celebrate America. And I wonder, is there anything particular that draws you to domestic music?
The variety. The sheer variety of music that this country produces in all forms. There's a marvelous line from Duke Ellington where he says there's only 2 kinds of music. There's good music and the rest. And we get to determine what we think is good as listeners, as performers. When you think about it, no other country has produced so many genres, so many styles. Musicians who can cross lines, go from one music to the other, and some who can't, but that's all right too. I think an orchestra now must be adaptable to much of the kind of music that goes on in this country. You're trained usually at the conservatory to play one way. You learn your Brahms, your Tchaikovsky, Schubert, Mahler, and then all of a sudden you're thrust into an orchestra. What's the first thing you're going to play? Harry Potter. It's true. And it doesn't matter the orchestra. Every orchestra is doing more film music, more pop music, because the demand from the public requires that. Wow.
Quick fact check on myself here. Nashville Symphony recordings have earned them a total of 14 Grammys, 27 nominations. Thank you for that, Mary. So the Pops concert thing, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, do orchestra players, how do they feel about it? My thought is that it could feel beneath them to play pop music.
It was that way for a long time. Perhaps it helps to understand that the definition of Pops concerts changed. The old model of Arthur Fiedler and the Boston Pops, which everybody knew, was that the program was divided into 3 parts. First part was what we call light classics, like William Tell Overture would be an example. The second part was usually a concerto, popular one like the Bruch Violin Concerto, Grieg Piano Concerto. And the third part were usually arrangements of popular songs or Broadway shows. Today, most pop concerts are about the artist that comes to appear with the orchestra. You don't see so much the Night in Old Vienna or even the Gershwin program like he used to. This is a big subject now. What are pop concerts going to be like? Are we really going to have the 50th anniversary of Beyonce as a Pops concert? We don't know. It's hard to tell. And
that is just a fascinating thought that has never gone into my mind.
We'll try it this way. What are we going to do with the prevalence of hip-hop, rap, all the
Yeah.
other styles. Will that actually be something that then translates to a pops concert 50 years down the line?
Wow.
We don't know. There's a lot we don't know now.
What do you say to people who have trouble going with you that evolution is appropriate?
I usually say that you have to keep an open mind. You have to listen to what other people are listening to. That way you have the ability to say, I don't like it, but now I can tell you why I don't like it. You can't just dismiss it if you don't know it. So I keep up with all the trends.
Wow.
And there are musics that I go, not for me so much, but I think I understand why. Or perhaps it's a kind of music that just doesn't strike a resonant chord within me. But a lot of it is also the discovery factor. I'm always curious about music, and that's what people should be. But getting back to your original question, orchestras have a little bit of resistance because of their training and their background in one style. However, most people now understand that you need to balance your programming in order to pay the bills. Look at our colleagues at the Kennedy Center. They don't know from one minute to the next what's going to be happening there. The opera is gone, ballet is leaving, the National Symphony, which I used to lead, doesn't know from day to day what it is that they're going to be playing and what they're going to be doing. Who knows how this is all going to turn out?
Right.
But at least for an orchestra like Nashville, there are certain parameters that are well in place. How we move ahead and how we anticipate what it might be like 5 years from now, well, it's moving very fast, like everything else. Do you remember a time when people said, oh, the internet's here, radio is dead? And
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah, we're on the radio, and
we're on the
some
internet.
people are listening. We're on the internet. If you're just joining us, I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville. Our guest this hour is conductor and composer Leonard Slatkin, who's back at the helm of the Nashville Symphony. We're streaming video at youtube.com/@WPLN. Also video, for what it's worth.
Well, it's going to be worth a lot. And we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Well, you can join a conversation in the chat if you'd like there. We're going to open the phone lines later this hour as we get into a conversation about the state of the arts, including the Kennedy Center, which Leonard Slatkin knows so well. All right, so you grew up around some of the biggest names in music because your parents played in the movies. I think your father was lead violinist for 20th Century Fox.
Correct.
Is that right? Mother, top cellist at Warner Brothers?
First cellist at Warner's.
They didn't want to work together there?
They happen to be getting different jobs at different times. Maybe it was for a good thing.
Yeah,
that
maybe so.
In the morning, they'd leave and go in opposite directions, one taking the Hollywood freeway out and the other taking Olympic Boulevard.
Well, so then they did form this kind of all-star quartet called the Hollywood Strings. Let's listen to a little bit. This is from a video that I found, of course, and just so beautiful to sort of see this guy who looks a lot like you playing across from your mother, and their their instruments are speaking to each other. You can tell. My question really is, how did you get out of being an instrumentalist?
I didn't.
Okay.
I started on violin when I was 3, realized I wouldn't be as good as my father, so I quit. Then I took up the piano when I was 8, realized I wouldn't be as good as my uncle, so I quit. Cello was out of the question because everybody else in the family played cello. So I took up viola for a while because nobody played that.
Okay.
And
if there was going to be a quartet, you're going to need one.
I was going to be in there.
Okay.
Eventually, conducting came in when I was in high school. I was doing arranging for the high school musicals, the spring and winter shows, and the music director at the high school let me do some conducting. And I realized that of all the things in music, that was the one I felt I had the most of a gift for. I could do that pretty well. I was composing as well.
When did you start composing?
Oh, I was composing from when I was 8 or 9 years old. I was always writing. And because I also used to play jazz and lounge piano when I was young, there was the feeling of being an improviser. And improvising is essentially composing.
Right, right. Well, let's actually listen to one of your compositions. This one's called Kina. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
That's very correct. It's a Hebrew word. It means elegy or lament.
Yeah.
And it was written in memory of my parents.
Yeah, let's listen. can you briefly tell me the story of this piece? Because I was going to try, and I'm like, I'm going to get this wrong, but it's a beautiful story.
My father was an incredible musician. He was a violinist, producer, arranger, conductor. He did everything. He was Sinatra's right-hand man whenever it came to recordings and concerts. He died when he was only 47. I was 19. And I decided on the 100th anniversary of his death, I would write something in his memory. But then it graduated into being something about my mother as well, the cellist. They were about to play the double concerto of Brahms, the one for violin, cello, and orchestra. It was a Friday. And I came home, and my father was dead in the bathroom. I found him. The next night was when they were supposed to perform. So this piece actually references the very Brahms concerto that they were supposed to play. In this case, the violin and cello are off stage, just playing little fragments of the Brahms. It's actually become a piece that other conductors have taken up now, Kina, and I'm very proud of it. I think it's certainly the most played of my compositions, other than an early thing called The Raven. But my composing life is fun because that's the creative part. Conducting is recreative. I'm doing what other people have already left behind. When you compose, you're making something that didn't exist before.
Well, it's beautiful. We need to take our first break, and why not use another Slatkin original to get us there? We'll listen to End Games while we're heading into this break, which features some of the lesser-heard woodwinds in the symphony as soloist. We're going to be back to talk about Slatkin's return, what's in store for the Nashville Symphony this season. And later this hour, we're also going to talk about the state of the arts and take your calls. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And Alliance Bernstein. Since 2019, employees have impacted our community by giving more than 5,000 hours of volunteerism in Middle Tennessee. AllianceBernstein.com. Alliance Bernstein is not affiliated with National Public Radio. And Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee, helping donors make more possible through the power of community giving. More at cfmt.org. WPLN's environmental reporting is supported in part by Nashville Zoo.
Did you know, in addition to the service we provide on 90.3 FM WPLN, Nashville's local news and NPR station, we also offer classical music on HD radio? Next time you're in the car, tune to 90.3 FM, and when the HD symbol comes on, select HD2. And when you're at home, ask your smart speaker to play Nashville Classical. More about Nashville Public Radio's multiple audio services, including schedules and ways to listen at WPLN.org.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. Well, now that you know he grew up in a house where his parents played strings in the biggest movies, were the right-hand man of Frank Sinatra, it should be no surprise that Leonard Slatkin is bringing Hollywood to Nashville. First concert of his kind of triumphant return is Wednesday night at the Skirmerhorn. Patrons are asked to dress like it's a Hollywood premiere, I think. So, Leonard Slatkin, aside from your parents' work on the silver screen, I wonder what kind of draws you to film scores?
Several composers in the middle of the 20th century would have said that film had become the opera of the 20th century. And that's really true because starting with Max Steiner, Alfred Newman, Bernard Herrmann, and so many others, they created this atmosphere on the screen, but the words were spoken rather than sung. And the music was there to amplify and make really clear what the totality of the atmosphere of that film was. Combining visual with the sound, well, people think silent films, that didn't have sound, but it did. There were always people playing music for silent films, whether it was organ, small group, piano, didn't matter. I loved films. I was good friends with Roger Ebert, the great film critic. And he used to say he never went to the cinema. He went to the movies. And to me, that's exactly right. You go to the movies, you're taken out of your world for the most part. And the idea that a director and musicians and the actors all come together, it's really remarkable when you start to understand how it's all put together. And the music to me was an integral component. I'm old enough now, I'm 81 now. I was on the set in 1953 for How to Marry a Millionaire, and I met Marilyn Monroe.
Wow. That's something to write home about.
Well, I could barely write at that age. So
there is that. But well, let's hear just a few clips from the music that'll be featured this week. Here's a rousing clip from the overture of The Seahawk by Eric Korngold. So the Seahawks from, I believe, the 1940s. Your parents didn't happen to play on it.
Oh, yes, they did. My mom's on that one.
Oh, really?
My mom did all the Warner's films. In fact, Korngold, for his final film called Deception, wrote a cello concerto where you can hear my mother playing. You don't see her. You see Paul Heinrich playing. But Korngold was a very close friend of the family. All those composers were at the time.
Do you share those sorts of stories during these concerts, or do you feel like you need to step back and not share?
I
them?
have a lot of stories. In fact, I could do the whole show without the orchestra if I needed to. But we need the music to set the scene. I'm never sure which stories I'm going to tell, so we have to kind of play it by ear. Here's what I won't tell. The film that I just mentioned, Deception. At the time, my mother was pregnant with my brother, but also one of the stars of the films, Betty Davis, was also pregnant. And Korngold went, well, you know, we should change the name of this film. Should not be Deception, should be Conception.
Okay. Well, and this was your brother, I guess.
My brother was Fred, yeah. He was on the way.
He was in utero, okay. Well, you're also playing some Hans Zimmer, like the orchestra suite from Dark Knight. Let's listen. You talk about like setting a mood, you know. It seems like he's the master.
He was one of them, but Hans Zimmer is also responsible for something I will talk about tomorrow night, and that's the radical change in writing for film in the 21st century. We moved away from the huge orchestral palette, which was continued by people like John Williams and Tommy Newman, so forth and so on, and even my son, who's a film composer. And now we moved into this electronic world where often the music is interchangeable from film to film. You don't have that identity of themes. It's not created like an opera anymore. And sometimes, for example, in a Christopher Nolan film, the music can actually override what's going on the screen, and that's intentional. AI will have a big impact on how we do all this. There are lots of changes coming to how film experience and music is going to be.
Wow. Well, you know, we talked about this briefly, but how do players feel, you know, learning these pretty accessible works from movies that might lack some complexity and challenge of other material?
That's a misconception.
Is it?
This music is really hard. First of all, it's continual. And the virtuoso writing, when you do a film with an orchestra in the studio, you have several takes to get it right. But an orchestra is going to see it. They have minimal rehearsal to put it together, and often say it's a Pirates of the Caribbean or a Star Wars film, whatever it is. This is very difficult music to play.
And they've never played it before. It's not like they learned it in
It doesn't
school.
come up in school.
Right.
And that's something that has to change too. Conservatories and music schools need to start training young orchestral musicians this world as well. And sight reading, that means putting the music in front of you and just playing it on the spot right away. Often orchestras don't have time to really practice and learn it. So it is very much edge of your seat stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville. Our guest is conductor Leonard Slatkin, who's starting a 3-year stint back as music advisor for the symphony. We're streaming video on YouTube today where you can join the running chat. We're also going to be taking your calls coming up about the state of the arts, from music education to the politicization of the Kennedy Center, which Slatkin knows so well. You can join us on air. That phone number is 615-760-2000 to talk to Leonard Slatkin. All right, so one more from this week's concert, if you'll allow me. John Williams from the Cowboys. Yeah, there's not much more American than cowboy movies.
And not only that, but you know it from the music. You know that's a Western saga.
Why does that feel like a Western saga? Just because...
Because it's got a lot of horns.
Is that it?
No.
No, it just doesn't make any... But it certainly does. I mean, you instantly took me out to Arizona,
That's
and
right.
I see the great
And
expanse.
that's the thing about writing for film. You can go from that to outer space, to something under the sea, to something in a single room for an hour and a half. The film composer has to be really flexible in creating these styles. As a symphonic composer, that's not necessary. You can stay with one style all your life. Film composer can't do that.
Wow. Well, so aside from the Hollywood concert this week, that this season is called the Symphony of America, I believe. Why this focus on music from our country, besides this diversity you mentioned earlier?
I had nothing really to do with this current season that's being performed now. But starting the next season in September, I have not control, but we're looking at many different things. We'll be celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Hall, the 80th anniversary of the orchestra, and the 250th of the country. Is it important to play American music in a palette that has Tchaikovsky, Brahms, Beethoven? The answer is yes. Again, something we talked about early in the show, it's the variety of music this country produces. We go through styles more proficiently than any other country in history. And those styles are now reflected in the concert music of our time. You hear everything. It ranges from electronics that go into the scores, to mood pieces, to new agey stuff, to edgy stuff. And it's an adventure, a sonic adventure which requires the audience to use their imagination. All of a sudden you're hearing a piece, but there's no visual image other than looking at the orchestra. That means if there are 2,000 people at a concert, with any luck, there are 2,000 different responses to what they see and hear.
Is there anything about this political moment that the emphasis on American music, why that might be relevant?
I don't think we've seen it quite that way yet, although it would appear that from what we see going on in Washington. But no, we haven't seen the change yet, if there is going to be one. And frankly, I don't think in the long run it's going to be an effect. Artists will do what artists want to do. That's the nature of the art itself. Should we be told by others what to write, what to play? No. But sometimes it's determined by the people who come or don't come to events, or contribute or don't contribute to events. We have to be a little bit careful about respecting our audience all the time and not take them to a point where they go, I don't want this anymore. But of course, people have the option to attend or not.
Right.
It's their choice. I really don't think it's the right thing for any politician to just say people should not be exposed to this kind of music. Because again, the people have the option of either hearing it or not. That's all. And if artists are going to succeed or fail, it's going to be based on their art, not necessarily their beliefs, which they can express through their music. Same as we have artworks. You look at a billboard, you go, that's a horrible billboard. But maybe there's somebody out there that really likes that billboard.
Yeah, tastes do change person to person. Americans, I didn't realize this, still prepping for this, Americans are underrepresented as conductors of symphony orchestras. I mean, I think the number from League of American Orchestras said maybe a couple years ago, there was like 4 out of the top 25 orchestras had American.
Less.
What's the deal with that? Do we have like a talent problem?
No, we don't, because I've seen a lot of young conductors who are really good. Each community picks a music director who they believe is the right person for their orchestra. So it's not like there's a discrimination going on or a plot between the orchestras. No conspiracies here. It just happens that's the time we're in. But look at my generation. You had me, you had Michael Tilson Thomas, you had David Zinman, you have a conductor who's going to be here in a couple of weeks, Robert Spano, you had David, I think I mentioned Robertson already, Jimmy Conlon. There were a lot of Americans at one time who were heading up orchestras in this country. Right now, it's just not that way, but maybe it's not so necessary. All you're looking for is the person who engages the community, who can relate to it, and who presents the kind of music that community and orchestra need. I'm not so concerned about that because I don't think anybody's being hired because of their nationality. It's about their ability.
Right. Well, you've had this amazing career in St. Louis for a very long time, Detroit, National Symphony Orchestra in D.C., BBC Orchestra in London, many more. You were highly sought after, but I sense that you, a while back, were no longer interested in being kind of tied down to a particular symphony, all the administrative work that entails. What is about that role that maybe needs to evolve?
I think we need to understand that there's a big difference between being just a conductor and being a music director who must also conduct.
I would say most people listening don't know why that. The conductor sounds like the person who's really the head honcho.
That's not quite the case because the music director is the one who theoretically determines all the programs for the year, hires the musicians, works on fundraising, works on promotional. You have a lot to do in this job that go far beyond the actual music making. And then there's the time you have to study. A soloist, for example, might carry 5 concerti during a season. Conductor will probably have 250 to 300 different pieces of music that they have to do. And an orchestra...
And know kind of all the parts.
And you have to know, well, you're supposed to know everything. So the music director job is very much administrative. You have to understand the various guidelines that each orchestra has, and they're all different rules, different regulations, how long the rehearsals are, how long the breaks are, what you can do. You're even told in some cases what you can and can't say to the orchestra. There's an orchestra in this country that has a clause that the conductor's not allowed to scowl at the orchestra.
No scowl? You may be scowling at me right now.
I don't know. I can see a big court fight over the meaning of the word scowl. What is a scowl really? Anyway, our behavior has changed. You no longer have the time like a Toscanini where he could say, I do not like your playing, you're fired. Those days are gone, and rightfully so. And I think most conductors now are more respectful of the musicians. The musicians are the really ones doing the hard work.
Right.
So you really have to respect that.
It's very impressive. All right, well, as we go to break, our last break, another piece from this week's concert by the great Randy Newman from The Natural. You'll probably recognize it. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the state of the arts with our guest, Leonard Slatkin. And we invite your questions as we hear from the Maestro about the state of music education, the politicization of the Kennedy Center. The number to join us on air is 615-760-2000. Or you can join Anna, who just commented on YouTube. The YouTube video streams, youtube.com/@WPLN. Just throw your comment in the chat there. We'll work it in on the air. We'll be back live with Leonard Slatkin. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And Amazon, proud sponsor of WPLN's daily show, This is Nashville, engaging our differences so we can discover our unity. More on Amazon's community work at aboutamazon.com. And the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Vanderbilt University, offering intellectual courses for adults over 50. Learn more about the wide-ranging topics and full curriculum at vanderbilt.edu/OLLI. And Parnassus Books, presenting an event with George Saunders, author of Vigil, in conversation with Ann Patchett, Friday, January 30th at 6:30 p.m. at MBA. Tickets available at parnassusbooks.net.
I think people believe that in small towns, people will just accept chump change or crumbs.
If you want to end homelessness, this is not the way to do it.
If things don't change and we don't stand up and say, like, we're not okay with this isn't the country that we want to be, I'm worried that it'll just continue to progress in that way and get worse.
Here in Nashville, people care about their work, their community, their state, I'm Metro reporter Cynthia Abrams. I cover what people care about.
I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville. So a year ago, when we started to see some artists bowing out of events at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. because of involvement with the Trump administration, our guest Leonard Slatkin spoke in favor of artists kind of standing up by not depriving audiences of great art. Slatkin's now back at the Nashville Symphony 20 years after his first round as an interim leader. We're going to end our hour talking about the state of the arts, and we welcome your calls. You got a question for our familiar maestro? Want to talk music education in schools, the state of affairs at the Kennedy Center? The lines are open. The number is 615-760-2000. You can also join the chat in our video stream, youtube.com/@WPLN. Anna writes, so happy to hear Maestro Slatkin is back conducting the Nashville Symphony. My appreciation for classical music was cultivated as a young symphony subscriber at TPAC during Mr. Slatkin's tenure there. I assume you recall TPAC. Have you performed there since?
No, and actually I wasn't involved with the orchestra. I think I conducted there only one time years ago.
Well, Anna caught it.
Yeah, well, it's a really long time ago. I think I had a harp soloist. Tchaikovsky's second was on that program, I believe. But no, my real association with the orchestra started with that first gala concert to open the Schermerhorn Center.
Wow. Well, you were music director for the National Symphony Orchestra in D.C. for 12 years, so you know the Kennedy Center well. Have your views changed over this last year? Because, I think you were responding to some editorial in the Washington Post about the Kennedy Center kind of encouraging artists to consider performing anyway, not to deprive audiences. So much has a lot of water under the bridge since then. Have your views changed at all?
Not really. I thought that the arts, as we've mentioned, are not to be politicized in any way because people have the option to attend or contribute or not.
You're saying that the audience sort of votes with their feet if they come?
And their pocketbooks as well.
Okay.
But let's look at it a different way. The Kennedy Center is a memorial to the late president. And it was intended for the performing arts, not a museum in that sense. My job there as music director was that I was hired by the National Symphony. I was not hired by the Kennedy Center. My job was to run the orchestra. It's one thing to say, I don't like the direction the center is going and walk away from it, if the center is doing the hiring. But it's another thing if it's the orchestra that's hired you. If I was asked to go back, and I have been, and the orchestra hires me, I will. If I was hired by the Kennedy Center outright to do it, I think that's a wait and see to me right now. I know that the opera company has left. They will be performing elsewhere. Other artists, including Nashville's own Bella Fleck, have chosen not to go. We know that audiences are in huge decline at the center, and maybe this is the best way to frame it, and people might want to chime in. The Kennedy Center now will tell you they've been successful in this past year because they have managed to balance the budget. But many performances are playing to half houses. So what is the measure of success? Is it that you've made money? The arts are not about that. And you try not to lose too much, but it is not about making money. It's about presenting the art, which is indefinable at best. So to me, that's not success. What are they going to do? Say, oh, we balanced the budget. Oh, but nobody came to hear anything. Nobody came to see anything. It doesn't work like that. It just doesn't.
Wow. Was leading the National Symphony a political job when you were there?
No, not at all. I was brought in to make it a little more American for the orchestra. They had Mstislav Rostropovich as the director, and the emphasis, although he did a great deal for American music, my job was to really give it the balance of repertoire that I knew and loved from growing up. And we did exactly that. We promoted American music when we went on tour. We recorded it. It was really a fun time. We did a lot of adventurous things. And again, if people didn't like it, they didn't have to arrive. But for me, 2 Senate terms was enough.
2 Senate terms. That's a good way to put it. A lot of people in Washington would think of it that way. Well, if you'd like to join this conversation, and it's a hot topic, I got a call from, no, it was a text actually, someone questioning whether we should be calling it the Trump Kennedy Center when we reference it in our newscast, and there was a whole discussion about that. So you can join the conversation with Leonard Slatkin at 615-760-2000. Chris has been waiting very patiently on the phone. Chris, you're on This Is Nashville. Go ahead.
Yeah, my issue is local-born musicians in the Nashville Symphony and the area. The 32, 33 public schools in the Nashville schools, there's only about 5 string orchestra programs. And this is Music City, USA. It's almost rather embarrassing. All of the counties have string orchestras. And I'm wondering what the symphony or what we can do to help build the string orchestra program so we can build more local musicians for our orchestras and our programs.
Chris, you've really hit a very important point, and one that the orchestra is going to address here. When I was a student at public school in Los Angeles, public school all my life, my high school, we had 3 choruses, we had 2 bands, we had an orchestra, and we had a composer in residence. The music systems in this country have just been going in decline for the last 40, 50 years. And if you're going to be in a situation where young people are not exposed to all the arts, all of them, sculpture, painting, music, whatever it happens to be, you're of course going to see a decline. We're now into the 3rd generation where this decline has occurred. So it's going to be up to the private institutions to really get in there, go into the schools. Even if you have a great facility like Skirmerhorn, you've got to get the orchestra out. They've got to get into the schools. They've got to get into the communities. And we have to fight for this, because we know that once young people are exposed to art, and that is a broad word now, art is a big, big word. Once they're exposed to it, they find one way to gravitate to something or other. It's not just the string programs either. We're talking about bands, we're talking about orchestras, we're talking about jazz ensembles, and here in Nashville, who's out there really showing those people about the indigenous music to this area in the schools? Of course it should be taught. You're absolutely right.
Big topic, Chris. Thanks for the call. To get in on this or whatever topic you would like to bring up with Maestro Slatkin at 615-760-2000 or pop it in the chat at youtube.com/@WPLN. And, I'm thinking, when I was in middle school here in 5th grade, at my school, Stokes Middle School, which is no longer there, you had to choose. You either had to play in the band or in the strings, and there was no other option. I don't think you see that.
You don't. And not only that, but a lot of those classes took place during curriculum hours, not
yes.
before or after.
No, it wasn't
That's
before
the importance we
school.
placed on it.
But is it fair? I mean, I know a lot of people would say, well, a lot of focus on testing, and so math and science and English, the tested subjects sort of took precedent. Is it fair to sort of put them in competition, that it was like, well, we just had to spend more time to pull up test scores?
I think you have to go and remember that young people are sponges, and they absorb what will become important for them in the future. But if you don't expose them to it, they won't know about it. So why not give young people the option? You want to be interested in creating a book, you want to write, you want to sing, you want to do this, make sure that they have a little bit of training, and mostly think about it in terms of history. If you block out all of music and say there is no such thing as music in terms of history, you're really in real trouble. Imagine Nashville without looking back and seeing what were the roots of country music. If you abandon that and don't look at it, you are really depriving yourself of something very important, heritage.
Jump in on the conversation at 615-760-2000. It strikes me that with music education, Chris was asking, kind of thinking, people who are local, who've been trained here, learned an instrument, and play in the Nashville Symphony. But I'm thinking of even just sort of training an audience who would appreciate the music. How big of a concern is that across, the classical world?
Huge. I think we lost a great opportunity during COVID, for example, when you couldn't play. This was the time to be creating individual content that people could see online or however it would be. Not just broadcasts of concerts. That's sort of boring. see flute fingers through harp strings. But why not say, when we come back, this is what you might experience if you're going to come to a live show. And that brings us, of course, what is the difference between listening to a recording, watching a video, and hearing it live? We live in a visual age now. Not only do we hear music, we see it. Everything is in 4 or 5 minute sound bites, even in the classical world. But orchestras haven't figured that out yet, and they're going to have to. To relate to a younger audience, you have to speak their technological language. One of the things we're going to try to do over the next few years here in Nashville is make the orchestra an integral part of the younger audience as well. Bring them along. Let them understand that the music we play is special, but it's also for everybody. Everybody can listen. It does help maybe to know a little bit about the background of a Beethoven, but it also is a good idea to know a little about the background of Johnny Cash. The more you know about his life, the more you appreciate the music. It's exactly the same thing in the so-called classical field. It's also up to so-called classical musicians to imbue yourself with the whole history of music. We play every kind now. We may not like every kind, but we play it, and we need to know about it in order to be able to present it at its best.
Well, you know, you talk about live performances and what's the difference. And yes, we're visual, but I feel like in person, live, you also get it's just not even on the best audio system, you know, especially you're talking about let's say a choir. It is not the same to listen to a recording as the chills that might go down your spine from a chord that you couldn't have imagined.
You hear a recording for the first time and you're really impressed. But the next time you put the recording on, it didn't change. The recording is the same. You might hear something different. You go to a concert. You don't know from 1 minute to the next exactly what's going to happen, even if it's a piece you know really well. But if you don't know it, you're coming to a concert for the first time, that experience here in Nashville, walking into the Schermerhorn, the Laura Turner Theater, and just seeing it, you already know you're in for something that's extraordinary. And hearing it, unbelievable experience. But you got to get there in the first place. Once you're there, you're going to be hooked.
Well, only a couple of minutes left with you here, and I want to get to a few questions. So you are helping find the next conductor in Nashville, I think. Did you know that?
Not quite.
Oh, maybe I just read.
I'm helping them as they look for a new music director. So a lot of that's defining what that will be. And the best way to explain that is that in the past, you always picked a music director simply on their conducting abilities. Now, in communities such as this, you're also looking at what do they bring to the community.
Yeah.
So you're trying to find a conductor to fit the model that you want your orchestra to be. And that has to be defined. And that's one thing we're working on literally every day.
But what is your vision for like the modern leadership of a symphony that might be different from how we've been doing it for a few decades?
Well, the openness to the different styles of music that exist out there. That's the first part. Second part is real involvement in the community to make yourself known to the degree, for example, that somebody on the Predators might be known. People may not go to the hockey game, but they'll know some of the star players.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Let's make our musicians the stars. Let them know who they are and what they do. And even if people don't ever go to the concert, there's an awareness of what it is. So the symphony has to become a little more non-threatening. We're just people. That's what we do for a living, and we're here to present something for you.
Wow. Well, before you can't, not to say you hadn't been here in the last 20 years because you are everywhere, it seems. But so 20 years ago, the symphony had not yet won a Grammy. Now it's won 14. I wonder what goals you might have for the symphony in these, in this next decade.
I think it's to expand our audience. Usually we like to say that symphony orchestra appeals to 5 to 6% of a given population of a community. I'd love to see that get up to 10%. Certainly the awareness of the orchestra. Continue to grow the orchestra in its repertoire and its ability to play. One reason I'm here now is I'm able to do several weeks each season. That gives the orchestra some stability, but it also gives the audience stability. If you see a parade of guests as they're looking for a new music director, you're not going to get that individuality of sound and thought. My idea is to help them be a true set orchestra in many different ways, that the guest conductors come in and figure out, how do I work with this orchestra? How do I get them to play what I want, but at the same time respect the orchestra and find that happiness? Same thing for the audience, and the same thing for the people who support financially.
Well, to close here, you talk so much about the legacy of your parents, and which we talked about, but what do you hope kind of will be the legacy of Leonard Slatkin?
I'd like to think I did a lot for American music, for composers. I'd like to think that I was helpful in education roles. And I'd like to think that I was a good role model for my son, who now becomes the 5th generation of Slatkins who are in the music field. And last summer, at the Hollywood Bowl, he became the 4th generation to have an appearance at the Bowl. Nobody else could say that.
4 generations of Slatkins at the Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah.
Well, we hope to see him at the Skirmerhorn sometime. Leonard Slatkin,
come tomorrow night.
Well, there you go. Leonard Slatkin, thank you so much for making your time for us. So before your rehearsal, with the symphony.
Oh, yeah, I've got to see him.
Yeah.
Hey, Blake, thank you so much. See you again.
All right. Thanks for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. If you want to catch up on your listening, you can always look at the podcast feed or go check out thisisnashville.org or see videos like the video we've just done here or any of our episodes at youtube.com/@WPLN. Today's episode was directed by Mary Mancini and Tasha A.F. Limley. Our board operator is Michael Pollard. The masterminds behind that theme music are Larange and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Boston Pops and BBC Symphony for use of music in today's show. The conversation doesn't end here. You can comment, tell us what you want to hear on the show by leaving us a message at 615-751-2500. You can also find us on Instagram at This Is Nashville. I'm Blake Farmer. Go in peace.
I'm Michael